So for this to be a shoot 'em up, obviously we need to create some kind of projectile system. So we're going to create the player's bullets and the controls for firing them. So first thing to do is make a sprite for that. So right click, sprites, create sprite. I'm going to call it laser 1 sprite. I'm going to preload something. Let's try and find it. Player laser sprite. Okay. So I'm going to modify the mask of that. So it's just like the tip of that laser beam. So I'm just going to set it to manual, and I'm going to bring it in from the left about 10 pixels. So now a collision mask is just the tip of the laser. It's just so that, like, if something gets hit by the sort of trail of it, it won't trigger a damage, basically. Let's click on OK on that. I'm going to create the origin at the center. This will be where it's produced. And then I click on OK. So now I've got my laser 1 sprite. Then I can create the laser as a separate object. So create object, player underscore laser, and select the sprite for it, laser sprite. And I'm going to add an event for the movement, and it's going to be a create event. So as soon as this object is created, it will start moving. And we just go to control, create a bit of code, and I'll give it movement. Get rid of that space there. And we're just going to use a function called hspeed, or variable called hspeed, and this is the horizontal speed. We don't need to worry about x and y because we're just going from left to right. And hspeed is going to be 20, so it's a positive value moving left to right. If we want it to go the other way, we'd put minus 20, but we want to go left to right. Okay, and end that statement. So as soon as it's created, it'll fly across the screen. Another thing we need to do is make sure it's destroyed when it leaves the level. Otherwise, what will happen is, as the player shoots, that object will just continue to exist, and eventually over time you'll just build up loads and loads of laser beams, and it'll be like several thousands of them, and that'll eventually crash the game because there's too many function calls and things like that. So we're going to add an event, a step event, because it's going to happen every frame, so we want to test every frame if the bullet's left the room. Pick up a bit of code, let's give it a hint. Destroyed when leaving room. So it's an if statement, and what we're doing is testing its position. So if x, and we're going to use the greater than expression, so that's shift and full stop, is greater than, instead of just typing in 1024, we're going to put in a variable called room width, and that gives us the maximum value of the room. And then in our curvy brackets, we'll destroy the instance. So instance destroy. Okay, it's got no arguments, just open brackets, close brackets, and then close the statement. That's very simple. So I'll test the position of the bullet, and if it's greater than the room's width, it'll destroy it. It's really important to kind of keep that in mind when you are creating objects and coding them, that they're destroyed when they're no longer in use. Otherwise you'll end up creating superfluous objects that will take down the frame rate and make the game laggy and glitchy, and eventually crash it if you have far too many. So we're going to click it solid, so when it comes in contact with stuff, it uses the collision mask. And that's it for there. Click on OK. So now we need to create the code to fire the laser and create it. So we're going to go into the player object, double click in there. We're going to use the step event movement code here. Let's just drag that up. I'm going to put a new hint in here called shoot. And I'm going to use an if statement and a keyboard check, but this time I'm going to use a different keyboard check function, because if we use the one we used previously, basically when we hold down the key it will constantly fire, like a kind of auto fire. It will fire at 30 times a second. So what we're going to use is keyboard check and pressed. So this will only send a positive value when the key is depressed, and then it will stop. So you have to press it repeatedly to continue to fire. The key we're going to check, so we're not going to use the ORD function here, we're just going to use the VK, I think that stands for virtual keyboard, enter, so that's the enter key. And what we wanted to do is create the instance of that laser, so we use the curly brackets, instance, create. So the arguments are where we want to create that. So we're in the player object, so we just specify X and Y, so it's the player X and Y. And the object we're going to create is player laser. Close that off and close the statement. So let's test that out. Let's OK all this. Let's run the game. So here we have our spaceship, press the enter key, and we've got bullets. So what we want to do now is I'm going to add a sound to that, because we haven't done anything like that yet. So let's close that down. So right click on sounds, create sound. Let's load a sound that I've created. So it'll accept WAV files. Let's have a look at else what it does. MP3 and OGG files. So that's the format your sounds need to be in. So no MP4s basically. I'm going to select ZAP1. I'm going to open it. I'm going to give it a name. And in terms of the attributes, for like small sounds like this, uncompressed and kept in the memory is fine. For music, you might want to have it streamed because it's a much bigger file. It depends on how big it is really. So let's click on OK. So now we've got our new sound, ZAP. If we click on that, it shows us the properties. And if you want to edit the sound, this opens up an external package, which may be Adobe Audition on your machine. But basically, Game Maker doesn't have its own sound editing software. Let's OK that again. So we need to play that piece of audio. And to do that, I'm going to go to the player laser object. And in the create code for movement, I'm just going to put movement and sound. We're going to use one of the audio functions. So it's audio. Where has it gone? Audio, play sound. So the arguments are the name of the sound, ZAP1. It has, well, the second one is priority, and this depends on kind of how many sounds you have going and the timing of when the sounds play. For what we're going to work on with this game, it's not going to be an issue at all. So I'm just going to put 1. And then the last argument is whether it loops or not. So you might have a looping piece of music, but we don't want this sound to loop, so we're going to set it to false. Okay. So play audio sound ZAP1, priority 1, and don't loop it. And that's all we need to do for that. confirm it, click on the tick box, click on OK, and now we can test it out. And as you can see, there it is. Brilliant.